But this week's story is about Justin Trudeau. So Justin Trudeau's approval rating has hit a new low, and this is actually from November. So it's probably even lower now, to be honest, judging from newer polls that I've seen. But essentially, Ipsos, which is a polling firm, reached out to about 1,000 correspondents, just everyday people, and asked them the simple question: should Justin Trudeau stay or go? Go meaning resign, because apparently a lot of Canadians are mad at Justin Trudeau for reasons that I'm sure that a lot of people already understand. So I won't get into. But yeah, essentially, out of the 1,000 people, 72% said that he should step down, which is a very high number. So, like two-thirds or three-quarters, sorry, of correspondents said that he should just resign because of how bad he's doing, and how disapproving of the job that they think he's doing. And out of those who identified as liberal supporters, 33%, so exactly one third of people said that he should step down. So that doesn't sound like a lot, 33%, but considering it's from liberal supporters, so liberal in this case, I don't mean like left wing liberal, I mean the Liberal Party. So Justin Trudeau's political party is called the Liberal Party. So these are people that have voted liberal their entire lives, or for long terms, pretty much, that are supporters of the Liberal Party. His people from his own party, a third of them are saying that he should step down. So that's news number one. And news number two is, as a result of Justin Trudeau's unpopularity, the other parties are surging, specifically the right wing party, which is called the Conservative Party of Canada. They've been surging in popularity. And right now, the overall approval rating, or the overall kind of polling numbers, show that across Canada, the Conservatives are at 40% approval, the Liberal Party at 24% approval, and the NDP, which is left wing kind of socialist party, is at 21%. So the Liberal Party has sunken so far that they've, essentially tied with the other smaller left wing party, which, the NDP typically, the Liberals tend to usually have around a 10-point lead or more compared to the NDP, but in this case, they're almost neck and neck. So the only bit of, I guess, semi good news for the Liberals and Justin Trudeau is that his support rating in Quebec is still higher than the Conservatives. So in Quebec, they have this party called the Bloc Québécois, which is kind of a Quebec independence, separatist, nationalist party. So they're at 32%. Excuse me, they're at 32% support, and the Liberal Party is at 28%. And the Conservatives are at 22. So he's still beating the Conservatives, but only in Quebec. And I believe that's the only province in Canada where the Liberals are ranking higher than the Conservatives. And last bit of news that might be somewhat concerning is that the federal voting intention among young people, so young people being age 18 to 29, so the Conservatives are at 34% approval, or support rather. The NDP are at 25%, and the Liberal Party is actually below the NDP at 23%. And then there are some smaller parties that I'm not going to get into, but essentially, this is also extremely surprising. So I think last week we talked about Joe Biden's numbers and how his approval rating among young people is pretty much neck and neck with Donald Trump now. And we have a similar story here in Canada, apparently, or even worse, actually, because the Liberals are more than 10 points behind the Conservatives among young people. And the reason why this is concerning is that young people tend to be more left leaning, and the Conservatives are the right leaning party. So it seems to me that the Liberals have really lost their support among young people and among just pretty much everybody except for certain people in Quebec. But yeah, I mean, it's not looking good for Trudeau. So Let me toss this question back to you guys. So, do you guys think that Justin Trudeau should resign as prime minister? That's the first kind of bombshell question. And second of all, yes or no, regardless of yes or no, uh, what do you think he's doing wrong, and what do you think he could do better? Like, what would you do if you were Justin Trudeau to kind of rescue your own polling numbers? Because the next election is scheduled to take place in October of 2025, so you still have a while to go. So, yeah, if you were Trudeau, what would you do to kind of rescue yourself if the intention is for you to run for election again? Don't speak all at once.
Uh, should Justin resign? I think that's a difficult question in the sense of do you want the Liberals to have a chance at re-election? Because I don't think Justin's going to get reelected. So, do the Liberals risk outsing Justin and reducing their base because if people like Justin, they get that'll be a problem with them ousting him. But at the same time, I don't think he's going to win the election because he's had so many scandals. And so from a liberal perspective, I would almost say that the party would be better off with him being removed as the leader so that they have a new leader to take them through the next election and hopefully win. Hopefully a good charismatic leader if they want to have any chance at winning. I think that Justin's definitely done a lot of things that could justify him stepping down. So I'm not going to say that there isn't a good reason for him to step down. So I'm not surprised at 72%. Although if you look at the numbers, it does seem that it was probably a little bit, more people who didn't vote for Justin, given that he had 33% among Liberal supporters and 72% of all respondents. If you do some mental math on that, it means that there are probably a lot more folks who were for other parties on that front.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, I think what's concerning is that you would think that if it was, if you ask a liberal supporter, somebody who I would assume identifies as a liberal party member, maybe even, or just tend to vote liberal in every election, a third of them say that he should step down. It's not even like a third of them don't approve of the job that he's doing. It's like a third of them are like, I'm so done with Trudeau that I just want him to leave. And this is coming from his own party. So I think that's a little bit like concerning, right? Like if I was Trudeau, I'd be kind of like shocked at that number. Like that's even though it's 33%, but
yeah, that's kind of what I was trying to get at with like the fact that he clearly is losing a lot of support within his own base, which is not good for him and in getting reelected, and that someone else, could theoretically get that 33% to vote for them, even if they may not vote for him in the next election, right? So it's I personally I'm not Justin's biggest fan, so I would not be opposed to him being replaced. But at the same time, also I want to make it clear that I think I like Freeland even less. And if he's just going to get replaced with Freeland, yeah, I'd rather the pretty boy over Freeland, who is I'm not a huge fan of. And then I'm also the voting intention among the 18 to 29-year-olds. I thought that was pretty interesting because you can see that 18 to 29 tends to be left leaning. If you look at the breakdown, there's 25 and 23 for NDP and Liberal respectively, which is right there, basically 50% of the vote. And then the Green Party is basically a left left-ish leaning party, I would say. So that's puts it over 50% of the vote is leaning towards the left. And with 7% of them voting for Bloc, that's basically a throwaway from the rest of the country's perspective. Like, it only matters in Quebec. So the conservative, like the right vote is less than 40% of the vote, really, which is interesting from a young person perspective, because I've met a lot of left leaning younger folk, but I've also met a lot of conservative leaning younger folk.
Yeah, I mean, so for that, I think the shocking part is the fact that the Liberals are less than the NDP, right? Because if I remember correctly, the NDP, especially among young people, they're always around like a quarter, right? 25% or so. And then in typical elections, how it shakes out is that NDP is at around, I mean, for young people, I don't remember the exact statistic, but I'm just guesstimating based on my prior knowledge of Canadian politics. But I would estimate, if it was a normal election, NDP would be around where they are at right now, 25%. The Liberals would be probably around 35 to 40%. And then the Conservatives would be, around the same as the NDP, if not even a little bit less, among young people. So like, and the Green Party and stuff, like all the other smaller parties, they're around the same, I would guess. But to be honest, I don't really pay attention to those numbers. But yeah, essentially, I think that's like how a typical election would shake out. But it's just surprising that it feels like not everyone, but like half of people, young people who would otherwise support Liberals, they all went to the Conservatives. And then the NDP people are still staying with NDP, and the Green Party people are still staying with the Green Party. But it's just, I think it's a referendum on not like, it's not an ideological shift necessarily. It's just a referendum on what people think of Trudeau, which has plummeted.
Yeah, I guess to sort of piggyback on that, I'll just kind of maybe reiterate a few things. Like you guys were mentioning, I think it's crazy that like a third of liberals within his system like don't agree on like how he's doing things and want him out. I think that's really crazy. And on top of that, like what you guys are saying are or is very true. A lot of, or the vast majority of young people tend to vote left-sided. So the fact that the Liberal Party is at 23 and then NDP, which is kind of like a lower tier, you would say, is at 25 is nuts, because typically it's between conservative and liberal. The fact that it's like the other way around is pretty crazy. And I guess he isn't really doing a really good job, Justin, in terms of keeping economical control over Canada. He's had one too many bad ticks, and maybe it is about time he steps down. He hasn't been really doing a good job. Last few podcasts, we talked about a few controversies he's done in the past. So, yeah, maybe it is time for Mr. Pierre to step up. But let's see.
Yeah, even if it's not Pierre, even if it's not Pierre, just having a different Liberal person step up to replace him as the leader of the party, I feel like would be a big improvement.
Yeah, fair play. Yeah, agreed.
Again, like you said, it might be Chrystia Freeland, right? So for those of you who don't know who she is, she's our deputy prime minister, which deputy prime minister is kind of like, the Canadian version of a vice president. So the idea is that if Justin Trudeau steps down, then he'll most likely be just replaced as Liberal leader with Chrystia Freeland. And she was the one that was really pushing things like the, freezing of bank accounts and stuff during the trucker convoy, which I think everyone here, we talked about in one episode or another, few episodes back, that we all disagreed with heavily. But yeah, she was kind of one of the main architects of that. And I don't think that voters have forgotten about it. So I don't see her being that much better for the job, and I don't see her being that much more popular than Trudeau if she were to run for prime minister. So that's the issue, right? So I'm going to answer my own question from earlier. Do I think that Trudeau should step down? Yeah, I think he should step down. As a Canadian citizen, as a concerned citizen, I think he's done a lot of harm for our country, and I would like to see a new prime minister. However, I can see from his perspective, it's like, if he steps down, then he admits defeat, and that doesn't look good for the party. And then if you're admitting you're defeated, then next election, that people are probably not going to vote whoever you pick as the next liberal leader back into power, right? It's like, oh, you messed up, your party messed up, let's try someone else. So I think that might be how people think regardless, but if he steps down, that's definitely how it's going to be perceived. So I can see his perspective that, for the good of the party, it's maybe not the best idea to step down, because then you make the party look bad and people are not going to vote for you. But I think this is, again, from a citizen's perspective, this is one of the situations where I really wish politicians would put country before party. And I don't believe in Trudeau enough for him to do that. So I don't think he has it in him to really put the country ahead of his own political party and his own political ambition and legacy. So yeah, it's unfortunate that I think he's just going to grind it out as far as he can till the next election, and then just do a Hail Mary and see what's best, right? As to what I think Trudeau will kind of do to try to redeem himself, I think he's probably going to print more money and give more handouts, right? Like, to buy votes. That's kind of like the age-old politician strategy. And I'm not saying that the conservatives don't do that, right? Conservatives do that as well all the time. But if we're talking about Trudeau right now, I think that's kind of going to be a strategy. And I think that ties into like our discussion of economics later, where I think that, a lot of people are calling for a stock market crash. I don't think that's going to happen, right? Because the Americans are having an election too, and Canada is going to have an election after the American election. So it's just going to be a lot of money printing and, free gifts from the government, which are not really free because they're just using printed money and taxpayer money to do all of that. But again, that's a separate topic. So yeah, I think that's essentially what's going to happen. Do you guys have anything else you want to add?
I'll jump in here and just add an additional comment on the 18 to 29-year-old.
Mhm.
I do the range. I do think that the NDP has been growing a lot on the younger side compared to the Liberals. I think they are definitely striking more of a tune with the younger generation than the Liberal Party has. And I think that also may be why we see them a little bit higher, because I think they do tend to rate higher with younger folk in general. So,
well, I think that might be a little bit of like a concern as well, right? Because again, I think like maybe this sounds partisan when I say it, but I consider the NDP to be a more I don't want to say extremist, right? But more partisan, like more left leaning party than the liberals, right? So, like, I'm not saying that they're extremists, but by that definition, comparatively, relatively speaking, they're more on the extreme. They're closer to the extreme left than the liberals are, and I think that's like it could potentially be a problem if we have bigger polarization, right? Because the people who are disenfranchised by the liberals, they might go for the NDP, who's has more leftist ideology, and then that's gonna like make the people who are right leaning angry, and then that's gonna motivate them to go more right, and then we just have a widening political divide, right? I think that's essentially what's happening in America, and it's starting to happen in Canada too. I used to think that Canada was a lot more moderate in terms of, and I guess we still are in a lot of things compared to the Americans, but I see a bigger political divide, a bigger kind of partisanship in Canada that I have never seen before in my life currently. So I think that's a bit of a concern. But what do you guys think?
I think on that front, I think the NDP has been pretty aligned with the Liberals for a while now. more so. Like I don't think that the jump to the left is as aggressive as would be enough to cause me significant concern. I think it's more of like a marginal leftness increase, and as far as I'm concerned, as long as it's moving down on the authoritarian side, I'm pretty all right with that. But I would say that currently, and this has kind of got a lot to do with the fact that the NDP and the Liberals have been working together for a while. I think that the NDP really just feels like Liberal with a different hat on it, you know. So I think I'm not. I think that also will dissuade voters as well from deviating from Liberal because of the fact that NDP is just Liberal with a hat on it. So why don't just vote Liberal?
Yeah,
Didn't they
for
do like
sure.
an agreement like a while back, like Jasmeet and Justin? Like I remember seeing that on the news. I forgot like what the context was about that, but
Yeah, so just to briefly explain kind of the background of that. So right now the liberals have what's called a minority government. So a minority government is when they have the most amount of seats, but less than half of the entire parliament, which means that they, in order to survive what's called a vote of no confidence, they would have to get another party's support in that. So at any moment, if there's enough momentum, and you bet there's enough momentum on the conservative side to trigger this, the conservatives could trigger what's called a vote of no confidence, in which if more than 50% of the MPs vote no confidence in their prime minister, it triggers an election immediately. So an election will happen within, I think, 60 something days. So in order to survive that, the liberals has to team up with another party, right? So they're not going to team up with the conservatives, obviously, because it's on the opposite side of the political spectrum, and the NDP is the biggest party with the closest, ideologically aligned values, where the liberals could work with the NDP. So if the conservatives try to vote Justin Trudeau out by voting no confidence and triggering an election, the NDP promised to support Trudeau, so that to ensure that he would survive the vote. And then in exchange, the Liberals conceded to some of the plans that the NDP had, which was to establish a dental plan for low income families for kids. And I think they're trying to establish something with eye care as well. So there's like several agenda items that the NDP wants to do, basically provide, like, expand upon our universal healthcare system, which, it's we can have a debate about that another day. But yeah, that's essentially what's going on with the NDP liberal plan, and we'll have to see how far it lasts, because at any time the NDP could decide, hey, like, we don't like you, Trudeau, anymore. We'll pull out of this deal, and then the conservative will see it and be like, hey, now's our chance to vote no confidence, and then that's how an election could actually happen within 60 days. So we actually don't, in Canada, it's not like America where there's scheduled elections and it has to be on that day. In Canada, it's like if you lose a no confidence vote, it will be an election immediately, or immediately within 60 days, um, regardless of when the next scheduled election is. So yeah, the NDP is holding kind of the key right now to when the next election will be. And if they decide to flip on Trudeau tomorrow, they could decide to do that, and we would have an election. And I think this is part of the reason why maybe some people are criticizing the NDP as well. It's like, because the leader of the NDP, his name is Jagmeet Singh. Singh criticizes Justin Trudeau on a daily basis on X, and yet, he's the one that's supporting the party, and he could call an election basically, uh, like tomorrow, but he chooses not to because he has his deal that he's working with Trudeau on. So, some people view that as hypocritical, and I get it from his perspective. It's like, it's just a political kind of agreement, and it's just a political games. But yeah, it's slightly complex in that sense.
And just to add to that, let's be real. If Jagmeet pulled his support of Justin, the next election would not result in a pro Jagmeet party being elected. The NDP does not have enough support to win the election on its own, especially now that it's just liberal light. And the CP, like the Conservative Party, would definitely win, which means that there's no incentive for Jagmeet to pull his support, because if he pulls his support, he's just basically handing the Conservatives a victory. So at least by maintaining his level of support, he can hopefully get some of the things on his agenda passed through, and not have to worry about trying to pass things through with the Conservative government, which will likely get a majority in the next election. So it's kind of like a stalling method, I would say, from Jagmeet and in his support of the Liberals.
But you know what I have to say to that is, again, like what I said for Trudeau, that he should put the country before party, right? And what I'm seeing from Jagmeet is, I feel like he's also putting the party before the country, because yes, like you said, you're right that if he calls for an election now, the NDP might not gain too many seats. They might actually lose seats. I mean, they probably will lose seats because their support has gone up slightly among young people, but overall, I think it's either stayed the same or even gone down a little among all Canadians. So it's definitely not going to benefit him, and he's going to have to work with, like you said, a conservative majority government most likely. So yeah, like from his political kind of like party standpoint, it does like make sense why he doesn't want to call an election and wants to like kind of stay in this deal. However, what I think, if you were to actually put the country first, then if you have good ideas for this country, then and you respect democracy and you love democracy, you should love the idea of putting yourself and your ideas in front of the public and in the court of public opinion and let the public decide, right? So if you really have good ideas, then you should not be afraid to voice those ideas in public because they're good ideas. But you know, it's just from a political perspective, I see it, but I think that there should be an election, and I really think that we're overdue for an election at this point, and I would welcome one. That's all I'm saying.
I don't think any of us would complain about Justin getting ousted. The problem is the who is taking his place.
Well, I mean, if you look at the polls right now, it's definitely going to be Pierre Poilievre, right? So, yeah. Last thing, maybe before we move on, what do you guys think of Pierre?
It's like iffy. It seems like he's going in the right direction for things, but if you look at a lot of his videos, he's just bashing on Justin the entire time, and then maybe not so much like talking about what he will do. I mean, maybe he has mentioned it a few times, but the vast majority of his interviews are just like, "Oh, Justin this, Justin that. He's doing bad at this," and then yeah, it's just what I've noticed.
Yeah, to jump on that, he throws a lot of stones, and I suppose when he gets elected, we'll find out if he lives in a glass house, because it's a lot easier to throw shade at the party that's in power when you don't have to be showing what you did particularly, right? Yeah, it's a lot easier to go, oh, look at how terrible they did, except they can't go and pull up a chart and be like, this is how good I did at the same time frame.
To be fair, he was the finance minister under the Harper government. So,
but that was so long ago, and that's such a completely different situation compared to now. There's no COVID like in with the Harper government. There was a different problem with the 2008 recession, but that was a whole different can of worms compared to COVID and all of that, the trucker rallies and everything. So I think I think Pierre is saying a lot of things that people care about, and I think he is calling the Liberals out on a lot of things that people are dissatisfied with. The problem arises in if he actually does anything about it, or if his plans do anything about it. And then also he has some takes that, I don't, a lot of people don't necessarily agree with him on, but you may agree with his primary takes of like housing is too expensive, or like the cost of living has grown too much. You might agree with that, but then some of his other perspectives you disagree with. And so it's how much do we think that he's going to help with the problems we care about while not harming or making decisions that are going to reduce the things that we currently have that we like, right?
I think I'll mention like one thing too. In the chance that he does get elected, which might probably happen, he kind of has like a lot to work with. So like let's see if he'll pull his weight up to fix good old Canada here. He has a lot to handle. So yeah.
Yeah, no, for sure. He's got a lot on his plate. And, personally, and this is just my personal opinion, I like Pierre the best out of all the candidates that are in the running for the next election for prime minister. So that's just my opinion. And I'm ready to give him a try personally. But yeah. Anyways,
it does seem to be a thing in Canada where we just jump between the Liberals and the Conservatives, expecting things to be different with either one, when in reality they all kind of screw things up in their own way.
Yeah,
nothing's perfect, I guess.
That's the thing, right? Like, you're never gonna find a politician that you're 100% in agreement with, and you're never gonna find a politician that like does 100% of the things that you like, right? So yeah, I don't disagree with any of the things that you guys said about, like, your hesitancy and seeing how he would do. But he is talking a lot, but because he's not in the position of prime ministership right now, he's not able to do a lot of the things that he's talking about, and he's mostly just kind of criticizing Trudeau for the things that he's doing. But yeah, I mean, it's complicated, right? Like, it's just, we're gonna have to see if he gets in charge how well he will do himself.